There has been a large amount of press focused on police officers, the service, the risk, the mistakes, the bravery, the abuse. What is the world of a cop really like? Stay with us and find out. Next on Lakeshore Focus.
Programming is supported by NIPSCO. Today's young minds are constantly reimagining what our world will be like tomorrow. That's why NIPSCO is upgrading its infrastructure now, so we're ready for whatever comes next. More information at nipsco.com/future.
Welcome again to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting the key issues, important events, and interesting people in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. We hear in the news about stories of police officers who save lives, stop crimes, risk their lives, and keep us safe. We also are told of police who abuse their power, don't follow procedures, or make costly mistakes. What is going on today inside the world of law enforcement? Maybe a better question is, what is it like to live in the world of a cop? To probe into the investigation of this subject are two veteran police officers who are heavily experienced and highly respected. Let me introduce you to Greg Mance, who is the police chief for the Town of Griffith, Indiana, and Brian Miller, who was the police chief for the City of Hammond, Indiana, but now serves as the Director of Safety and Security at Purdue University Northwest. Did you guys like the probe into the investigation?
Very nice, Keith. Very nice.
Outstanding. Pick that up as this kind of like cop lingo, make you feel comfortable.
No,
did it work?
Yeah, I felt like I was at home.
Well,
Yes.
I'm trying to get comfortable because I know you're carrying a gun, so I'm like trying to sit here and go, okay, I better behave, right? Surely he's not going to. You're not carrying it. You're not packing it today, are you?
No, I left it in the car.
You left it in the car. Okay, so we know not to mess with you even when you're in your car, right?
When I'm in the car, yeah, don't.
No road rage with you. Well, thank you guys for being on the show.
You're so welcome.
And you know, so many of these shows today are like, we could sit here and talk about, what's crime like in Griffith and, what's going on in Hammond. But I really want to talk a little bit about what's it like to be a cop today. So, I mean, what is it like today? It seems like there's a tough time for cops. Yes?
It is. It's like being between a rock and a hard place. There's been some highly documented episodes of police making mistakes and some, intentional behavior, illegal behavior. And certainly it has not helped us. It's really hurt us in the community. And then, of course, we have CNN mania that they look at now every single police shooting and try to draw their own conclusions, which usually aren't very favorable to law enforcement. So they are. Other than the President of the United States, our occupation right now is the most visible one in our country.
Why is it? I mean, I know it kind of picked up because of the incident probably in Missouri that kind of triggered all this, but it's just kept going. Why is it
I think there's a few things that are taking place. One, I think law enforcement is continuing to grow as a profession. We continue to expect more of our officers. The public expects more of our officers. And the media age in which we live in which everything is instantly fed out to the public, I believe those two things have kind of worked together to kind of highlight some of the issues when they go wrong.
Well, are things? I didn't think things were any better or worse than they were before. I mean, in fact, I thought historically law enforcement was getting kind of better as time went on.
And I think it is. I think you'd agree.
Certainly better trained, better technology, better equipment. Yes, there have been some highly publicized mistakes, but you know what? That's really the minority of individuals who've went out and abused their power. Most police officers that I know and have come to know in 26 years are pretty decent individuals who just go out and do their job every day.
But they sure are blown up when they make the mistake.
Yes, sir, they are.
It seems to me that there's a culture right now of wanting to tear down the traditional heroes in society. That if they can find a weakness in any kind of hero, I'm not saying every officer is a hero, but that profession historically is viewed very highly. So if you've got a group of people that want to tear that down, any kind of thread they can pull, I think they're pulling in this day and age.
But it's interesting. I challenge that a little bit because if a first responder, if like a paramedic or a fireman was making those same kind of mistakes or made a mistake, it is not going to get the kind of press, I don't think, the police officer is going to get today. So here's both first responders kind of in the same category. Why are the police taking the brunt of this?
I think it's because we're the ones that enforce the laws. We're the moral and the ethical ones in the public. The ones that are supposed to be enforcing these morals and these rules. And if we're viewed as being acting any differently than the laws we enforce, then rightly so, we're going to be challenged on it. However, it's when we're judged quicker than others is where it's problematic. When you look at the headlines, and you mentioned CNN, it doesn't matter where in the country, if an officer shoots someone this day and age, especially if it's a white officer shooting an African American, that's gonna be the headline: white officer shoots African American, not officer in Atlanta shoots suspect.
Right.
They're going for that because it brings in the attention. Everyone's looking to see if that's the next misstep an officer made.
So with all this attention, how's that affecting being a police officer today? I mean, so what's kind of the morale or the general disposition of I can't say the guys, the men
Guys
and
and
women
girls.
who are doing this?
It's lower. You can't expect it not to be when every single time you turn on the news or you open up a newspaper, you see a negative report about a police officer somewhere that's made a mistake or whose judgment is being challenged. So it is difficult when they go on calls now. They always know they're being scrutinized. Many police departments, my former one, Hammond, they're now wearing body cams also. So everyone's filming everything you do, whether it's you or the public. And they're going to look at that, through a microscope and second judge that split-second decision that you made. And they're going to spend months talking about your split-second decision.
So how does that impact the performance of the officers? I mean, you got security guys, but you've got the former police. But today, I mean, I think if I was an officer, I'd be a little more cautious,
Absolutely.
a little more careful, maybe
Sure.
afraid to do something.
And that's, as an administrator, Brian has law enforcement officers working for him in the university. I've got 32 officers that work for me, and it's a fear that one of my officers, and I'm sure Brian has the same fear, that one of our officers is going to hesitate to respond the way they were trained because they're afraid that this is going to get leaked onto the media or it's going to get scrutinized by the media, and everything I do is going to be second guessed. So I'm not going to take that action that I should take. And that could get that officer hurt or killed, and that is my worst nightmare. So we constantly train, trying to reinforce that if you follow the law, if you do these right things, you will prevail, and the department will stand behind you in those actions. And I know that my town will stand behind my officers as well.
As soon as you were telling that, I quickly went to that. So I hesitate to shoot because I'm afraid, and then
Correct.
my partner gets shot and
Correct.
killed.
Right.
And you said that's got to be the worst nightmare.
It is.
So besides just reassuring them, I mean, is there anything else you can say?
Get training. I'm part of our firearms instruction training at Purdue, and we try to teach them more shoot, don't shoot, more scenario-based training, so that if they ever are put in that position and they have to make that split-second decision, hopefully it'll be the right one.
So tell me what they're trained or told in terms of shooting. Maybe I watched too many Westerns as a kid where they would just shoot the guy in the leg to stop him from shooting somebody. I mean, why don't we just kind of shoot the wound? It seems like every time somebody gets shot, they get killed.
That would be wonderful, that we could teach someone to shoot someone's gun out of their hand like the Lone Ranger did, but truth is it would never happen. Even police who are more trained than the suspects miss probably 75% of the shots they take. In a very stressful confrontation, it's difficult to fire a handgun with real accuracy at any distance. So we teach our officers to shoot at the center mass of a torso, hoping that it'll strike the individual. We don't teach them to try to shoot guns out of hands. That's Western, and like you said, it's Hollywood. In real life, it's not practical at all.
Well, that's real interesting, because I mean, with that statistic of shooting, you say shoot for the body, 75% of the time they're probably going to miss or hit an arm
Correct.
or something anyway, so they're almost, to some extent, lucky or unlucky if they hit the whole body, right?
Correct.
So this is a little bit of a random thing.
Oftentimes, and when you train, we train with simulations, we train with computerized machines that will show you where you shoot, where the threat was. And I know through my own experience and watching other officers train, oftentimes where we find the officers shooting, even though they're trained to shoot at the center mass of the body, they visualize and focus in on the threat. So you'll see many times where in the scenario, the officer shot at the hand or where the hand was, where if there was a gun in the hand, you're shooting that direction. Oftentimes that would be in that area, but also, if your hand was out, it might hit your hand. So as much as we train to shoot to the center torso or the center mass of the body, when you're in that real life scenario or in that stressful situation, you slow things down in your mind and you focus on where that threat is, and more often than not, I think that's where you're going to find some of those shots being landed.
So this is kind of the risky side of the job, being on duty.
Yes.
But how about the side of it, that it's got to be somewhat depressing, or just you got to get pretty down about just all these people saying such negative things about cops today.
But conversely, Keith, oftentimes officers will go into a restaurant or they'll be in some public place and someone will come up to them and say, "Officer, I appreciate what you do." So while there is that negative side to it, right now there's a lot of different feeling also that people understand that, yes, absolutely, there were some mistakes made, but the majority of policemen aren't that way, and the majority of policemen take their job very seriously and perform their duties well, and they want to thank them. So it's hard sometimes.
I like getting those messages out to our viewers of things like, officers really appreciate people walking up and just saying, thanks for what you do in the community, because they are getting some of that other side. Do you see any other side effects to this, Greg, at all, for any of the officers? I mean, with this kind of negative atmosphere that...
Yeah, I think it's a natural reaction for any profession to recoil when there's negative perceptions out there about your organization or about your group of profession. So what we tried to do is, as law enforcement, tried to get out in the public and tell our story, not to recoil, not to do that natural instinct of recoiling and hiding behind something. You're seeing more and more departments, mine included, Brian's included, where you're having community outreach, you're having citizens police academies, you're having social media being used to get out our message. We're seeing better cooperation with the media, where we're inviting them in to come do ride-alongs, to experience what we experience, know why we do the things we do.
Because that's one of the criticisms that the police community often gets is, you guys do circle the wagons, or they do circle the wagons and go, man, everybody's out after us, and hey, cops hang with cops, and and so you just kind of live in this little world. And so these are the kind of activities that, is that really help get them out of this?
It doesn't. We are kind of, like you said, we are a tight-knit group, because sometimes you see things and you do things at work that other people don't understand. I remember years ago, I was working at New Year's Eve, and we went to a party, and a young lady had used cocaine, and she had stopped breathing, and we tried to give her CPR all the way to the ambulance. The ambulance took over, got her to hospital, and she passed away. Well, the next day my family met for New Year's Day, and I still wasn't right from that. I really took it hard. I'd never met this woman in my life, but it was hard for me, and they didn't understand that. They couldn't. My whole day was ruined, and theirs just went on. And when I told them the story, they didn't understand why I was so upset. But you didn't even know this person. But that's my job.
It's interesting, because I had a Sherrillville police officer on here fairly recently with a domestic violence victim, and when she was telling her story and getting very emotional, I turned and I said, "Doesn't that affect you?" And I could see in his face he was affected, but he said, "I have to try to turn that off."
Absolutely.
He said, "I can't respond to that. I need to be clear." So, I mean, how do you live with that?
You leave the hospital after finding out the woman passed away, and I got in the car and took a call immediately. So like you said, you have to turn it off, and now it's a new day, it's a new call, now you have to handle this.
But how do you turn that off, or how do you turn the humanity piece back on? Maybe that's a better question.
I think everyone has to find their own way to deal with it. It is a very stressful job. There's a few other professions that probably have that same stress, doctors and things like that, where they're witnessing this. We tend to witness things in the heat of the moment, when it's fresh, when the tragedy just happened, and that does stay with you. There's a big push for officers to live in the communities they live in, which there's a lot of pluses behind that. But there's also a few negatives. I know when I live in the community that I am the police chief for, but I know about every street or every block in my community I can relate a call to. It's hard to turn that off when you're driving down the street and you know that there's a fractured home there where the wife is getting beat regularly, and she's not accepting the help that you're giving. This house had a murder in it. These things, when you live in it, it's hard to turn that off. So the officer that lives out of town, they as much as an administrator, I'd like to see them live in town, I can identify why they moved out of town. They get to turn it off a little bit. They get to go and relax with that grocery store and maybe not worry about who they're going to encounter when they're going down that grocery aisle.
Can you both talk about a personal experience you had as an officer where you felt like, I mean, something really had a personal impact on you and it just was tough to get through it, adjust to it over time or whatever it took?
The very last case that I worked in violent crimes, and I was a detective. I worked robbery, homicide. And the very last case I worked was a David Mouse serial killing, and that was in 2003, December of. And David had killed 3 young boys. He had killed people before. This was his third outing, I believe. And he buried them in the concrete in the home that he was renting. And myself and 2 partners disinterred the bodies from concrete, and we ended up presenting the case to the prosecutor, and David Mouse was convicted. And I never did get over that. You know, so it was funny. I was talking to one of my partners 6 months ago, and he goes, you know, when did you stop having bad dreams? And I said, when I do, I'll call you. And that's been since 2003, 13 years, and I still think about it often. I can't, like Greg says, when you go down a street like that, you remember it immediately. You know, it's not something you can turn off.
So was the trauma of that just kind of seeing the body kind of thing, or just
all of it. Spending 3 days,
happened?
you know, taking children out of concrete.
Because part of the investigation, you've got to kind of reconstruct what
Absolutely.
happened. So you have to kind of relive this, not only just disinter the bodies, you've got to kind of relive the crime.
And we had to go and tell the parents that their sons were gone. So I often say, I wish this would forget what these have seen.
You got to...
Yeah, you know, I, like Brian, I worked with the Major Crimes Task Force. I worked violent crime. And there's a few murders that I'll never totally recover from. There's, you know, a pregnant mother who was killed by her husband. You know, I went to the office.
That was fairly recent.
That was early in my career. That was probably about 2003.
Okay.
You know, and you get to know the families. There was another one towards the end of my career where it was 2 sisters were raped and killed by a sex offender that just been released from prison. You know, their bodies, you know, were left and burned, and you know, just as much as that scene is traumatic, you get inside the heads when you're doing these interviews with these suspects. You get inside their heads, and you realize that we're walking amongst monsters. I mean, there are monsters amongst us that, for whatever reason, aren't getting the treatment they need, or because of their upbringing, their childhood, the issues that they dealt with weren't corrected. Now they're adults and they're violent and they're dangerous.
So you've got officers who are walking around carrying some of this burden, and those are kind of at the top level, but you still see the abuse and child abuse, all kinds of stuff going on with people.
Yes.
So that officer comes in and sits down with you and says, I'm just really struggling with this, Brian. I can't get over this. What do you say to him?
I've been there, and I know exactly how you feel, and I can say that with all certainty. I do know how you feel. We try to get them help, counseling, or whatever they need. And I always tell them, you have to find a release. You have to find a hobby. You have to work out. You have to spend time with your family. But you have to find a way that when you do go home, you can turn it off, or at least turn it off for a little while.
What happens when you got somebody who you watch their performance and they've been to the counseling and they just still seem to be just struggling with this? I mean, at some point, do you have to say, maybe being a police officer, your time is up, you just need to do something else?
Or we found an assignment for them that was, you know, away from that, maybe an inside assignment, or working in our jail or someplace where they didn't have to see all the things you do on the street. And for some it's worked, some it hasn't. Some have left the department. You know, we have alcoholism problems like any industry.
Is it higher with police officers than others?
I don't know. I would say...
Venture and guess yes.
Yeah, I would say
I think
yes.
it's as much as it is a crutch for normal society to deal with the stress. It's a crutch for the law enforcement officer as well. And you know, we're dealing with a lot of stress. So I would say that my guess would be a higher frequency in our profession.
I want to go a little different direction. How do you deal? I know in any police force you got 1 or 2 boneheads. It's like, really? I mean, seriously, you just don't seem to do anything right, or your temper is always at the edge. I mean, what do you deal with that officer you've got that just looks like they're this far from being one of these people recorded and making a mistake?
I think you have to lead from the front first. I think you have to go out there and show your officers that you can do the job, and hopefully they'll emulate you and follow your lead. Second, you have to have good supervisors that can, when you're not on the street or you don't see that activity, they do, and they can bring it to my attention, or they can start mentoring or maybe even disciplining this person.
And I think it does bridge back to your earlier question. A lot of times, we do a very good job of vetting out those officers or those people who are applying to be an officer who we think through the psychological, the polygraph, the background investigation, we usually can weed those people out. Once in a while, they do squeak in.
Absolutely.
More so in a department
Yes.
where there might be, political pressure to hire someone.
Or 10 years into it, their life changes and all of a sudden they
That's-
become a very angry person.
And that's what
Yes.
that's what we're talking about, trying to find these resolutions, because more often than not, that officer's changing because the job has changed to that officer. So I think you're seeing law enforcement as a profession trying to find ways. There's still a stigma for an officer to go to an administrator, at least within their own culture. The stigma within the own law enforcement culture to go to the administration and say, you know what, I've got a problem. I'm having a hard time dealing with this job, because then you're viewed as weak. So what I think you're seeing some of the more professional, progressive police departments doing is they're trying to find ways for the officers to seek this help out without having to go to the administration.
So the buck stops here. One of your officers does make one of those mistakes. How much of that is your fault?
It's like the manager of a baseball team. At the end of a losing season, who's held responsible? You are, certainly. You'll second guess yourself. Did I train him right? First, did I select the right person? Did I train him right? Did we supervise him the right way? Where did we fail?
So does the buck stop with you too?
Yeah, I mean, especially with the public, and they've got every reason to, they put their faith, my elected officials put their faith in me to make sure these types of things don't happen. So I take responsibility for those types of things. That's why we have so much faith and trust in our mid-level supervisors to bring these things to our attention, to see them before they become the issue.
We're down to just the very last minute here. So what do you wish the public knew about police officers, about cops today? Just one message you wish they knew.
I'm a human being just like you.
I would agree. That sums it up perfectly. We're human. We do our best, but there's frailties in all human. Get to know an officer, get to know the department you live in that services your community, and get to know what they're going through, and show them support. If you had an officer that you had a good reaction or good action with, write a letter to that chief. That goes a long way.
Okay. Thank you both for being here. Really appreciate it even more. I appreciate the service and the leadership that you both provide. I feel much safer and better knowing that we got guys like you in charge of things. So thanks for being here.
Thank
It's
you
a
very
pleasure
much.
being with you.
All right. Let me describe a few common situations and see if you've had one of these experiences. You go to a party with all the work colleagues of your spouse. The whole evening you feel like you have no idea what they're talking about and really don't care. Here's another one. You visit a church, and when you attempt to blend into the coffee time after the service, you watch all the little cliques and groups hugging, laughing, chatting with each other. You stand alone. Lastly, you attend a meeting of a club, civic organization, or governmental unit. You don't have a clue what is going on, and no one explains anything or is willing to answer your questions. In fact, you don't even know who to ask. What do all these occurrences have in common? Each is a group of people who know each other and are commonly bound by background, affiliation, or mission. It is comfortable for them to communicate amongst themselves, sharing thoughts, feelings, and information. They share a common vocabulary, understand the same concepts, own the same values, and have experienced the same things. In many ways, they are a closed group, difficult to penetrate. The visitor is the outsider and seldom able to integrate into the group. I don't want to talk about the person outside the circle. I want you to consider the potential negative impact on the group as they remain insular. There are no different perspectives. It becomes easy to criticize or perhaps make light of people who are not part of your group. The habit of saying, "Oh, no one understands what we go through," reinforces staying apart. Some groups feel they are better than others. Perhaps they believe they are persecuted or treated poorly. Eventually, the group tightens inwardly, protecting their own while refusing or restricting interaction with others not of their kind. I think all of us can be guilty from time to time of being part of a closed culture. My challenge is for each of us to recognize when it is happening and then take steps to avoid the negative side effects of such behavior. In the Leadership Northwest Indiana program, I had a young man who was part of a specific group with a strong political agenda. When surrounded by individuals who were different than him, he remarked, "It is so refreshing to be among people who think and believe differently than the ones I spend all of my time with." There was a guy who had it right and saw the value of extending himself beyond his common, comfortable group. We hope that our show enlightened or challenged you in some way. If you have thoughts and comments about today's broadcast, send them to our email address on the screen. You can also access our past shows from the website. Tell your family and friends that you watch Lakeshore Public Television and it has an impact on your life. Be sure and join us again next week for another Lakeshore Focus. Until then, I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.
Programming is supported by NIPSCO. Today's young minds are constantly reimagining what our world will be like tomorrow. That's why NIPSCO is upgrading its infrastructure now, so we're ready for whatever comes next. More information at nipsco.com/future.